Welcome to Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. My name is George Ortega. This is episode number 25. It is Monday, August 10th, 2020 at 2:56 p.m. Eastern Time. And, the more I do this show, the more I appreciate that conveying some relevant information is important, but the real message, the real challenge that our world faces is dealing with the moral implications of these pandemics, of preventing pandemics. So with that in mind, let's just briefly, hopefully, go through what the challenge is, what the problem is, and then just go into the morality. So this coronavirus was very likely the result of a wet market in Asia. But as history has shown, our farms in the United States and Mexico and Canada and throughout the world, especially our factory farms, are also dangerous sites where these pandemics originate. The 2009 swine flu pandemic originated in a pig farm in Mexico. The Spanish flu of 1918 killed almost 100 million people, 50 to 100 million. They believe originated in either a bird or a pig farm. So basically, because universal vaccines are in the distance, a universal flu vaccine is perhaps 10 years out, but it wouldn't just be about a universal flu vaccine. It'd have to be a universal coronavirus vaccine, a universal, there's Ebola, there's different kinds of viral infections that cause pandemics that we'd have to develop these vaccines for. And then there's the problem of antibiotic resistance. By here in the United States using 80% of our antibiotics on animals in these farms, especially factory farms, we're creating a situation where by 2050, 10 million people are expected to die every year because the antibiotics we have now will no longer be effective. So the idea is that in order for us to be safe from future pandemics, we need to end the farming of animals, ideally, because, we end factory farms, that'll take us maybe 95% safe from these pandemics. If we end all farming of animals, we probably could reach 99 plus, a surety that we won't have future pandemics. So that's, and the last part of that message is the way that we can do this without all going vegan, without stopping eating meat and fish and dairy, is to finance this new industry that began in 2013. They create what's known as clean meat, cultured meat, cell-based meat, lab-grown meat. It's basically that you take a cell from an animal and then put it in a petri dish, a lab, and feed it some nutrients, and it grows just as like it was in the animal. It gets tricked into believing it's still in the animal, and we obtain our meat that way in a much healthier way for us also. Less heart disease, less cancer. So that's the goal. And in order for us to have these products in supermarkets in, let's say, 2 or 3 years, when we're kind of past this pandemic, hopefully, we may not be past this pandemic in 2 or 3 years, but let's take the optimistic scenario and say we will be, then as we're emerging from this lockdown, this distancing, economic shutdown, we could be very, very safe from future pandemics. All right, so, and the last part of this is the Congressional Budget Office in May, before we had this, what people are calling the second wave, or this, resurgence of the virus in many parts of the United States. The Congressional Budget Office predicted this coronavirus is going to cost the United States alone, forget about the rest of the world, $8 trillion. So the last part of the appeal of this series is, let's spend 1/2 of 1% of what we'll be spending on this one to prevent future ones, to finance this new industry. Let's spend $50 billion. Let's not spend it next year or the year after. Let's spend it, as soon as Biden comes into office, by February, March, this money should be released. You release this money, you get many more researchers in the field. The researchers have much better resources to conduct their research. And that is our best, short-term, long-term also. That's the holy grail. We do that, and we really don't have to worry about pandemics. We end family farms, we end factory farms. And naturally, this would have to be kind of like a Manhattan Project. It would have to include the whole world, though. Just like with climate change, the whole world has to be pretty much involved, at least each region, Asia, Africa, Europe, United States, North America, South America. Well, the different regions have to be part of the climate change solution to reduce greenhouse gases, as much as we can. It's the same thing with preventing pandemics. This transitioning from farming animals to cellular agriculture would have to happen across the world. All right, and that's a major challenge. But again, this has devastated this country, and imagine what it's doing to countries that are far less rich. So, all right, well, that is basically the where we stand. That's the choice before us. Do we just do nothing because we're afraid of the livestock industry, because we're afraid to rock the boat or whatever, or we do what's necessary? All right, so now let's get to the moral component. I'm addressing the 80 to 90% of you here in the United States who believe in God or a higher power. I'm imagining that that many of you hold the understanding that when we as individuals and we as a community, as a collective, as a global population do good, we're rewarded, and that this world is so amazing in so many ways. We have such abundant food, we have heating, air conditioning, we have so many blessings. This will inform you that we have done a lot of good collectively and individually. And so when we do bad, the understanding I think you have is that, yes, God punishes us, or, the creator, however you want to define this spiritual being that seems to enact justice. So let's, if we consider this, because again, this is the 25th episode. For those of you who've watched fairly regularly, you're probably fairly familiar with the information. You get it by now, but you're probably not talking about it much with people. What needs to be done isn't being done, and not enough people are talking about it, And so, what, from a moral perspective, these animals that that are in the factory farms, especially over 70 billion land animals and about 1 trillion fish. And fish, feel pain like land animals. Books have been written about this. They suffer this pain because we inflict it on them indirectly. We basically pay people to torture them, to abuse them, to, chickens are housed in these football field sized airplane hangars. Tens of thousands of chickens, broiler chickens, for about 7 weeks. And during that time, they're living in their urine and their feces because it's not cleaned up. And then the smell of ammonia is so strong that a person would have to have a mask on, with goggles so that the ammonia wouldn't burn their eyes. And it does burn the eyes of these birds. And these birds, they're debeaked, and their beaks have very sensitive nerve linings. They're debeaked so they don't peck each other in their agony, and they become aggressive when they're so tortured. So I think it's reasonable to suspect that this coronavirus and the next one, which we will have unless we do something, will happen as a punishment. As a punishment. We should know better. We should know better. It's not like we're not. It's not like we're not aware of morality, of what moral dictates. The Bible commands us to be kind to animals. The Bible allows us to eat animals, but it does not allow us to torture animals or to pay others to torture animals. So, so this is a moral issue, and it may, by my thinking, the way we treat these animals is more than reason enough for God to be afflicting us in this way. But it goes beyond that. I mean, like, our world aborts as many lives each year, about 50 to 60 million, as die of every other cause of death combined. That can't be right. That can't be good. That can't be the ethical. Certainly in cases where the life of the mother is at risk, there are certain circumstances where perhaps abortion is the kind thing to do. But so this may be punishment for that also. This may also be punishment for our condemning our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to hell. And it's kind of like a literal expression in this case, because the earth is warming, and like by 2050 here in New York, it'll be as hot as it is in Florida regularly. And you can imagine how hot it'll be in Florida. And rising sea levels, so many of our world cities are on coastlines, and so many of those cities will no longer exist after, I don't know, 2050, 60, 70. There will come a time where the waters will just they go into the subway systems, for example, in New York City, rendering them inoperable, unusable. These are just some of the, many, effects of climate change that threaten us. So yeah, let's consider that, this may be a punishment for all these things, but, let's now move back from morality to science, to naturalism. So, let's hope that we're being punished with this coronavirus, not because of climate change, not because of abortion, not because we keep almost 1 billion people in poverty when we could easily lift them out of that poverty. Let's just say that it's because we are paying people to abuse and torture over 70 billion land animals and over 1 trillion fish every year. So we can buy, our meat and fish and dairy and eggs less expensively. Okay, let's say that's our sin. So sometimes, sometimes a person will commit a sin, people will commit a sin, and it's bad enough. But then they make it worse. For example, they try to cover it up. They lie about it. They, commit other sins so they're not caught for the original sin. So it could be that on top of abusing all these animals, our collective sin may be that, well, we're being called upon to spend 0.5% of what we'll be spending to deal with this one in financial terms. We're not even talking about the loss of life, jobs, so much, so many other damages we're suffering. Just financially, we're called upon to spend 0.5% of what we'll be spending on this one to give us an amazingly good chance of preventing future pandemics. And we're saying no, we're being indifferent, we're not paying attention, we're not investigating it. If that's the case, God may not allow us to emerge from this coronavirus for a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. This can go on and on. Some of the HIV has been killing millions of people since the 80s. It's what happens is, like, these epidemics, when they are worldwide, then they graduate to being pandemics. And if no vaccine is ever found, as is the case with many, probably most of them, I would think, then they become endemic, meaning that we experience them year after year after year. Now, granted, in a milder way, but the flu here in the United States, kills a lot of people every year. 20, 40, 60,000. Fine, it doesn't kill as many as the 160,000 we've already lost to coronavirus, but it does disrupt a lot of lives, kill a lot of people. So, all right, about 10 minutes left. Our politicians are corrupt. Here's one example of corruption. If you run for Congress, House of Representatives, it's a 2-year position. You have to run for re-election every 2 years. Let's say you run, and the salary is, I think, over $100,000, maybe $120,000, I don't know. But if you run for office, you win. You serve 2 years, you fail to get reelected. Let's say you're a horrible congressperson, your constituents vote you out of office, boot you out. Well, the way our politicians have designed the pension plans for former Congress people is like, they get 100% of that salary as a pension for the rest of their lives. All right, that's one example of the corrupt nature of our American politics. Just the fact that we're not doing anything about climate change, that we're not doing anything about these pandemics, we're not doing anything about a lot that needs to be taken care of, will show you that there are politicians who are beholden to themselves, to their own reelection efforts, and beholden to the people who finance their campaigns, the contributors, the corporations, the rich people who aren't doing it for our benefit. They're doing it for theirs, so they can make more money or whatever. So if we start with the understanding that our politicians aren't going to promote this moral argument, then we're left what? The media? All right, this is 25th episode. I know from future shows that I've done, shows on happiness, free will, I know this show has a bit of reach. It's just because here in Westchester, you have a lot of people who live here, work in the city, and And the show goes out to other communities. So, you know, I know in the past, it hasn't had major reach, but it's had at least enough reach in the past to get conversations started. There are occasional media articles by, you know, very few by the mainstream media, very few by New York Times, if any, actually, Washington Post, that make the link between, I mean, it's a three connection link. The link between these pandemics and our factory farming, and the understanding that if we end factory farming, if we finance this cellular agriculture, we have an amazingly good chance of being free of these pandemics in the future. So again, the media is not promoting this because the media is kind of corrupt also. I mean, you know, rich people own the media. You know, they're afraid, well, you know, maybe they're afraid that their taxes will go up if you know, if we have to fund this. It's only $60 billion, again, compared to the $8 trillion we're spending. It's nothing, but, you know, so anyway, so who is the, what institution do we have that we can count on most or best to deliver this message? If we go back to history, we understand that the abolitionist movement here in the United States was started in Pennsylvania by a group of Quakers, a small group of people. I think there were like a dozen initially, and then it spread. You know, it became a moral or religious issue. You know, just that God does not condone. Fine, God may have condoned slavery in the past, but this American strain of slavery was unbelievably harsh and cruel. And so the Quakers took it upon themselves to get the message out. And that led to the abolitionist movement expanding throughout the rest of the country, and it led to the Civil War and to the Emancipation Proclamation. And so they did that. You know, it was a small group of religious people. So I think that teaches us that not only, I think, are our religious institutions the only group of people we have that are concerned enough with morality to address this, but I think they represent our best chance, perhaps our only chance. And so you know, so let's say, yeah, our churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, you know, they represent our best chance. So like, you know, and so basically this requires a certain amount of courage by the religious leaders. You know, unfortunately here in the United States, probably throughout the world, you know, our religious leaders are generally connected to congregations. You know, they lead congregations, and I say it's unfortunate because that relationship constrains what they can say. In other words, like if they offend the sensibilities of their congregation too deeply, if they're promoting these ideals, these goals that the congregation is not in line with, well, they run the risk of being, you know, asked to leave. You know, that the congregation will just choose a cleric who is more in line with how they think. On the other hand, you know, if these clerics don't summon up the moral courage, the moral intelligence to attempt to confront their congregations about this, what purpose do they serve? You know, aiding and abetting a congregation, a group of people who believe themselves to be good people and are in certain ways, but really on balance are really cruel. I mean, you can't, you know, if you're buying meat and fish and dairy, and let me tell you right now, unless you're paying 4 times the price as the average price you see, you know, sold in supermarkets, you're buying meat and fish and dairy and eggs that, you know, wherein the animals have been subjected to horrible abuse and cruelty. So, you know, if you're a part of a congregation and it's not that, you know, it's not, you can't just buy organic, you have to buy, you know, cruelty free, and it has to be on the label, you know, explicitly. So if you're not doing that, again, you're, you know, you may think you're a good person, you know, but God is the ultimate judge, right? And it seems, you know, we can only guess, but it seems that God is not judging us, you, to be all that good. So, all right, well, again, after 25 episodes, it's dawned on me that the information is important, but this is a moral issue, primarily, fundamentally. And, you know, let me just like briefly say, I've gone over it in other shows, but, you know, it's not that I'm blaming you. I don't believe in free will. You know, our top scientific minds, Freud, Einstein, Darwin, Newton, all understood that we don't have a free will. It's not really our fault that we're so evil, but, you know, so it's not about blame, but it's about consequences. Fine, it may not be fundamentally our fault, but, you know, when we're compelled by God or nature to do good, and that may not seem fair, but, you know, what can I tell you? When we do good, we're rewarded, and when we don't, we're punished. So that's the world we live in. That's what we have to accept. So again, it is a moral issue. We watch some, you know, go to YouTube, you know, just Google animal cruelty, go to Netflix or Amazon. There are documentaries on how these animals are treated. One by Alec Baldwin lasts about 12 minutes, called Meet Your Meat, M-E-E-T, your M-E-A-T. You know, it should tell you everything. So, all right, less than a minute left. You know, watch this every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. on channel 76. If you get Optimum, 45, you get Verizon, White Plains Community Media. Episodes are also on YouTube. And God willing, I will continue to do this series until people wake up, until people finally get it. Maybe I've been trying to like deliver this message, not as a threat, as I understand, you know, I've been doing mostly, but as a promise that we can create a much, much better world, just as God is punishing us for the evil we're doing. If we, you know, spend this $50 billion, stop abusing these animals, God will probably reward us in many ways, including perhaps allowing us to deal with climate change. All right, well, I hope you're having a good Tuesday, and I will see you again next episode, God willing. Thanks.